There are a couple of things which you need to look at to be sure of prior to taking the decision to study abroad, right? Now, this webinar is particularly about Canada, and the points which you need to consider. The first point is the kind of course and the program which you're choosing. Are you going for an undergraduation program? Are you preferring to do a post-graduation or advanced studies in that? So you have to be very clear about the kind of course you would like to pursue. And after that, you need to know which institution type you're choosing. So there are basically two institution types. We have, let me just mark this down here. There are colleges and then there are universities. So colleges offer diploma and post-graduation diploma programs, and universities offer proper degrees which include bachelor's, master's, MPhil, and PhD, and so on and so forth. So there's a slight difference in what they offer, but both of them are equally good. The third point which you need to consider here, just a second. Yeah, the third point which you need to consider is cost, because studying abroad requires a high amount of investment and you need to be sure what is it that you're stepping into. So you need to keep in mind the overall program fees for the entire duration, be it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the living costs for that, the preparation costs, which include your application fees, any fees required for the examinations or the tests, the visa fees, and so on and so forth. So apart from just the tuition fees, there are numerous ancillary expenses which keep adding on, and you have to factor that into your calculation while preparing for this. Finally, we have this point called as the duration of course. Yes. So oftentimes what happens is we end up choosing a course to go abroad and study for 1 year because certainly it's cheaper, it's more affordable, and it gives you the experience you're looking for. But just to keep something here in mind, that it is important to choose the duration very carefully, particularly if you have interests to stay in the country afterwards, right? If you wish to stay in the country and work or move ahead, you need to ensure that your duration of the course is chosen properly. So with respect to the duration part, it is important to know what happens here, and particularly in Canada, what is the system which follows after your education is complete, right? This is something which you need to factor in because it's important. So let's say if you do a 1 year program, it means that you would get a 1 year work permit. So PGWP is post-graduation work permit. This permit allows you to stay in the country after your education is complete and allows you to work for a certain amount of time. So if you choose a 1 year course, you will only get a 1 year work permit. If you choose a 2 year course or anything above 2 years, you will get a 3 year work permit, as far as I know today. So it's important to choose the duration carefully because you need to know what happens after that and what do you plan to do after your degree is over, after your education and the study part is over. All right, so please keep that in mind. So the next part here, which we will talk about, is the research which you need to do. What kind of things you need to think about prior to choosing your course and your university or the institution, whichever you wish to do. Right, okay. So it's very important to know how to select a course and how to make the right choice to pick the right course. So there are several parameters which you need to go through, beginning with the program type. So are you looking for a double bachelor's? Do you already have a bachelor's and do you want to do another bachelor's in a similar field again? Are you looking for advanced education? So please be very clear about which category you're choosing. And after that, start your research. The second point to keep in mind is the relevance to the topic. So is the program related to your existing field? This is important because oftentimes what happens is the reason why many visas or visa applications are rejected is because there is no link between the past education and the future education that the student wants to pursue. So it's very important that you try to pick something that is related or integrated to your field. And if it's not, try to think about why do you want to pursue this and how will it help you in the future prospects? How will that play out for you? Because it's important. And the reason I say this is because mainly for the visa issues. So please be clear with this. And once you know how you would like to use it, and if it's solid, it's reasonable, you can write that down on your letter. And then that's what you submit to the embassy for your visa approvals and so on and so forth. That's a separate topic after the application process is over, the decisions have been received, and then you start applying for the visa and so on. So this is just something to keep in mind, that try to pick something that's related to your existing field or something close to that. Of course, it can be a specialization, that's perfectly fine, but don't drift off too away from the existing course, I would suggest. The third point to keep in mind is the institution type. Are you choosing a college or a university? Both are perfectly fine. Whichever suits your needs and caters to your subject and the thing which you're looking for, go for that. And the fourth point is institution requirements. Now, certain institutions, certain colleges and universities have very specific, just a second, have very specific requirements, which means that they might have particular examinations they require, particular credentials they require, so on and so forth. So please be very careful with this and try to be sure that you know the requirements of each institution prior to applying that. Right, okay. So let's go into the preparation part, which is the core of today's topic. Now, what exactly are the things which you need to prepare? This is very important because let's say you've done the research, you know, what exactly are you going to do? Which university or which institutions are you going to go into? All of that is clear and set. Now, what happens next and what is the preparation required? What are the things you need to do before you apply, right? So these are mandatory requirements. There are three main categories of that. First one is language tests. Now for Canada, it is mandatory to include language tests in your application. That is the institution application for your admission and also for the visa. So there are numerous exams which you can take. So these three, IELTS, TOEFL and PTE are English language exams. TCF and TEF are French language exams. Now this is not mandatory for anybody coming to Canada except for people going to a province called Quebec, because that's a French province and that's where I believe it's required that you have French proficiency and language skills in that. But apart from that, IELTS is generally the most preferred examination which people opt for. And this is mandatory for applying, and then even later on for the visa process, right? So you can pick any of these three exams for English language proficiency, right? I have given IELTS and I gave that twice. So this was my preference and this is what I prefer. All right. The next thing which you need to remember is that in some courses, there might be some additional exams or additional aptitude documents which they might require. For example, you have some exams called as SAT, GRE, GMAT. I'm sure you would have all heard about this. So these are not mandatory requirements, but there might be some institutions or they might have some courses or programs which have this as a parameter during application. So which means that you have to submit those things while applying, which means that you have to prepare in advance and then you have to write that down, get your results, and then you can apply, right? So that requires a lot of beforehand planning when you intend to study, right? And the third part, this is again important, is the special documents. So additional documents which you might be required to submit, which let's say includes work samples, writing samples. They might give you a questionnaire which asks you that why do you want to do this course? What is the outcome of this? How will you use it? So on and so forth, right? Or if you are in a design related field, they might ask you for a design portfolio and so on and so forth. So depending on the program, there will be some program specific requirements. So please look into that while you're doing your research. And I strongly suggest making a book and writing things down here. Which course are you doing? Which institution is it in? What are the requirements for it? Because between institution to institution and even course to course, the requirements keep changing, including, let's say, the format of the paper size which you need to submit. So these minor details are very important because they do play a big role in your acceptance or the rejection of your application. All right. So these are the three things which you need to prepare more or less. Now, this is another important part, documents. So why are documents so critical? Why are they so important? Because, you know, documents are something which represent you. They speak on your behalf. All your mark sheets, all your degree certificates, your work examples, your statements, your reference letters, all of those, that whole collection is representing you and trying to make your case in front of the examiners who are evaluating your application. So you need to be very sure that the kind of documents you submit are of the best quality, comprising of your best works and examples, right? So try to take this very seriously because you cannot be physically present, but your documents are the ones representing you, and that is the basis on which the the admission committee decides whether to accept or reject an applicant, right? So please be very careful with the kind of documents you submit. I just don't mean the photo quality. What I'm referring to is the kind of work which you would be adding to that to make your case stronger. All right. Secondly, your documents are also legitimate records of your academic background and as well as your nationality, because they are generally served as proofs as well for the academic background and the nationality. So they are very important, and do not miss any document. If they have given a list of documents, try to add all of that while submitting the application. Now let's look at the list of documents after this. So do not be overwhelmed. I understand that this is a heavy, dry matter on this slide, but let me explain this to you. Now, what I'm telling you, these are general document requirements. All of this I have submitted, and the people I know who have also applied and gotten through, they have submitted all of these documents. So these are general remarks on this. Of course, there might be some course-specific documents, so please do your research for that particular course in that particular institution to know all the details about it. All right. The first set of documents are the academic documents. Academics certainly refers to your education, which includes schooling and college or university, whichever you've done in India or any place else. Your 10th mark sheet, 12th mark sheet, all your mark sheets for all the semesters, whether it's bachelor's, diploma, master's, whatever it is, all of them you need to submit. Apart from that, you have the transcript and the consolidated mark sheet. These two are very similar, but there is a small difference. Transcript is more official and is often sent out as the final document from the university or the college. Your degree certificate is very important as well. So these things, what I'm marking here, are absolutely mandatory. You must have them. And in case of those of you who are going to pass out or have just passed out, you might be in the process to receive the transcript or to receive the degree certificate still. So please ensure that you push that through and have all your documents ready before you start applying for these things, because otherwise it gets very difficult and it gets tricky to manage. Another thing to note here is that there is something called as the ECA, which means the Education Credential Assessment. It is not required for most part of it because it's not necessary for the moment, at least not for the study applications. So I'm just introducing this here just so that you are aware of it, but it's not required, it's mostly optional. So do not worry about it too much, but let me just tell you a bit more about it. ECA is basically a way to assess your home degree, which let's say Indian degree, and its equivalency to the Canadian degree. How much is the education equivalent to in Canada? That's what it does basically, right? So this is done by numerous agencies, one of them being WEST, World Education Services. And you need to check with your institution if that's required or not. For most cases, it's not. But if it is, you need to take this into account, because you would have to take your transcript. Your university or your Indian institution, your home country institution, would have to send this to the WEST agency in USA or Canada. Then they will evaluate and then they will send the document back. So it's quite a lengthy process which consumes time. So if required, start your preparation early for this. The next set of documents here are your test documents. The second set of documents which are required are the test documents. Particularly, this is mandatory. English language test is absolutely mandatory. The reason they make it compulsory is because the medium of education here is in English. And it's very important that the students have the ability to read, write, listen, and speak in that particular language in order to handle the course and the submissions and the assignments and everything that it entails. So this is the reason they always check your English language. This is absolutely important. So do not take it lightly, because this matters a lot in the way you get selected. All right. You have three options here. IELTS is generally obviously the most preferred one, but please check what is accepted with your respective institution, because some institutions might not accept IELTS or some might not accept PTE. It varies, right? So please check what is accepted, and based on that, try to give the corresponding exam. The second set of exams are the French language exams. Once again, they are not required for any other province except for Quebec, because Quebec is a French colony. And this is the place where they mandate French, because the entire communication, the entire province communicates in French. So that is a requirement to enter that province. So for most cases, it's not required unless you're planning to study in that particular province. Otherwise, you can ignore this point. That's perfectly fine. The third point here, which we have, is any additional program specific examinations, which, as I mentioned, include, let me write this down, GMAT, GRE, SAT, so on and so forth. Right? There might be very, very specific examinations for your particular course or your particular background, and they might require you to submit that test report in order to assess your application. So please, once again, check these requirements with your institution and your course, whether what is required and whether these exams are mandatory or not. All right. This is absolutely mandatory, non-negotiable. You have to submit this. And these documents do take a certain amount of time to prepare, beginning with the statement of intent. This is extremely, extremely crucial, because this is where you tell your story, you describe your background, you tell why are you interested in a particular course, how would you like to use it, how will it benefit you, what will you learn, and your future plans after the course. So the statement of intent is your explanation letter, which you submit to the institution to explain why should they select you, why are you a positive candidate to be selected and accepted here, right? So this should be something that is very strong, very personal, and extremely well written. So I suggest that write it out a few times, give it to your peers for proofreading, try to improve your language here, and try to be as efficient as possible. Oftentimes it's also the case that these letters have a word limit or a page limit. It might be 1 page, 1.5 page. Sometimes it might just be 500 words. So you need to be sure that you are able to adjust your intent letter accordingly. Again, the requirements, the format of this letter varies from institution to institution. So please check this very carefully, right? This is extremely important. The second thing which you need to submit is your resume or your CV. Now, both of them are fine. You can submit any one of them. Giving a brief description of your background, if you have any work history, any internships, any courses you did, try to mention all of that and submit that. The third thing which you can submit, this is again a mandatory requirement, reference letters. Now, reference letters are something which the admissions committee looks into very carefully, because they are letters which speak on your behalf. It is somebody else vouching for you and talking on your behalf and giving in a way assurance that, okay, I know this person, he or she is good and they are a suitable candidate for the program, right? So generally 3 reference letters are preferred, with at least 2 academic references. Now, what I mean by academic references is 2 professors or anybody from your institution who was teaching you, who was engaged with you while you were studying the course, has to give a letter, right? Because you are applying for an academic program and they generally weigh the academic references higher than the work references or any other references. Your references cannot be personal. They have to be independent. They have to be someplace where you have worked, you have studied, somebody who knows you for a while, knows your capabilities and skills, and so on and so forth, right? So try to get your academic references straight. And of course, that includes your professors, your HODs, the deans, so on and so forth. So anybody who you have a good standing with and you feel that that person would vouch for you, go with that option, right? Now, the next thing to remember here, just a second. All right. Right. So the next thing to remember here is about the references. Speak to your references prior, before submitting the name. So when you submit your admissions application, you are required to submit the details of your referees, which includes their name, their email address, their phone number, and the institution or the office, right? So you need to be very clear whose name are you submitting and whether they are okay with you submitting their name as a referee, right? So speak to them, communicate this with them prior. And once that is done, get that consent, submit the details. And oftentimes what happens is that these referees, so the institutions reach out to the referees independently. The referees are sent an online link where they have to upload a letter from their side independently without your awareness or your notice, right? So you need to be very sure that the kind of references you get are solid and they will watch for you, right? So please be careful with this. This is very important. The next point here is any specific documents which the program might require. Now, once again, because I did architecture and because I was opting for a master's program here, I was required to submit a portfolio, right? And that portfolio includes a variety of my works which I did over the years, my interests, my college work, my professional work, any other projects which I did, all of those things had to be included there. Now, if you're submitting something like this, I strongly advise, and I believe that's what the committee looks for, is how diverse your work is, right? How cross disciplined you are in a way. So try to do that if it's required for your course and your admission program. You can have a portfolio, some work samples they might ask you, maybe some photographs of certain projects you've built or done. Depends, it varies perfectly from course to course. So what I'm saying is generally oriented towards architecture because that's where I'm coming from. But just to give you an idea, some of them might ask you for writings or questionnaires as well. Yes, because when I applied, the requirements for the portfolio, even the format, the page size, the margin size, the kind of size of photos they require, all of these things were varying between institutions. So I had to make one portfolio and I had to revise that 5 times or 6 times depending on wherever I applied, and I had to send that out. So please be very careful with these things. And they might also have additional questionnaires. A couple of them had questionnaires which were given and I had to fill them up and submit them. So please check these requirements once again with your institution and with your course about what exactly do you need. So they would often have a list of total requirements, which includes all of these things, and that would help you out in understanding what you need to prepare, right? One more point here, please note that the submission format varies between institutions. Yes, this is very important to remember. Even the page size varies between 2 institutions. So you need to, in a way, make separate folders for each institution or each, let's say, college or university, and then prepare and apply for that. And the last thing which we have is the passport, of course. As we all know, passport is an essential international travel identity proof and document. And without that, there is no way you can go abroad or go anywhere, right, outside India or your home country. So if you do not have a passport yet, try to get your passport done immediately and get that ready, because sometimes they might require you to upload the passport in the application process as well. All right, so any questions or doubts on this? I understand it was quite lengthy, but this is really the core of what you need to do while preparing to study abroad.